Hey everyone, welcome to Strange Stories, where we explore near-death experiences and supernatural stories from people who've had a glimpse of the other side. If you enjoy our content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. Without further ado, let's get to the story of the day. It started with a light, a dazzling white light with no reflection or harshness. Then a sense of peaceful gladness, peace and wonderful tranquility envelops me. It wasn't euphoria or any other emotion I could think of, save possibly glory in the warmest, most positive sense. It was nothing like what I had experienced as an Air Force medical officer on May 5, 1960, at Lackland Air Force Base for flight officers, deliberately hyperventilating to see how that felt, and then, later, deliberately taking off my oxygen mask at a simulated or flight chamber low oxygen, high altitude, about 20,000 feet, and experiencing the exhilaration of mild hypoxia, as well as other symptoms which occur physically. During this period of joy, peace, and serenity, I heard nothing, felt nothing, smelled nothing, and had no feeling of suffering or physical being. I did experience the impression that I was chatting with God and receiving crucial insights and facts about the nature of our being and the reasons for our being that I must not forget and must transmit to others because of their enormous importance. I was led to believe that there was a God, a loving God, who is the same for all people. There was more to it. I knew something was communicated, but I don't recall anything specific. I recall being told that it was not my time yet and that I needed to return, that there was more for me to be and that this was distinct from anything I needed to do. I then began hearing very loud and terrible sounds, paper ripping, in retrospect, probably sterile envelopes of gauze pads, and then voices, men and women discussing in low murmurs, and then a voice saying, "It's almost lunchtime," and another stating, "He suffered a respiratory arrest." I was still not feeling any pain and couldn't see anything. The white light had vanished. I awoke in a hospital bed with a BW Hospital neurosurgery critical care unit, with a tracheostomy in place, my arms and legs bound to a bed, IV tubes and a urine catheter in place, and hearing the sounds of a bustling critical care unit. I knew I experienced a respiratory arrest, but I had no idea why or when it happened. The last thing I remember was going into the hospital for a C2-C7 laminectomy infusion to repair damage from a skiing accident in March 1968 at Killington Mountain in Vermont, which had intermittently caused me pain, but had recently caused problems using my right arm, so I figured it was probably prudent to finally have the surgery that had long been recommended. Prior to intubation, I remembered the pre-op procedures. Much later, I was told that I had been strolling down the corridor with a nurse the day after a successful laminectomy infusion and an uneventful extubation, when I abruptly dropped to the floor, unable to breathe. Because I couldn't be intubated while unconscious, a neurosurgeon in the next room performed an emergency sarcothyroidotomy on me. My throat had enlarged significantly the day before after being extubated. I then got to the hospital records, which revealed that I experienced a respiratory arrest at 10:30 a.m. on that date, and that my PO2 had dropped to 60%, before swiftly returning to normal once I was tracheotomized. I'm not sure how long it took between my respiratory arrest and the successful placement of the tracheostomy, but I do know that regular intubation was attempted and failed. I originally told no one what had happened, because I couldn't speak with the tracheostomy tube in place. I struggled to express myself adequately at first, until a caring student nurse gave me a pad of paper and a pencil, for which I was incredibly grateful. I recall her breaking down in tears as I told her how much I appreciated her thoughtfulness. My recovery was slow, and I remained in the hospital for about 4 weeks, and then 4 weeks in a rehab hospital. While in the hospital ICU, I attempted to check myself to see if my experience, which I remembered immediately, was due to brain damage caused by hypoxia. I'm a doctor who has received professional training in neurology and psychiatry. I recall being perplexed at first, unable to recall the last 6 presidents, subtract 7 from 100, or spell the term backwards. Finally, I had the foresight to inquire about the tablets they were giving me, and understood I had the right to refuse the haloperidol and other sedatives they were administering. I could recall the previous 6 presidents, subtract 7s from 100, and spell the globe backwards, and I didn't believe I was hearing or seeing things that weren't there, but I was hesitant to share my experience until I was safely home. Even then, I was hesitant to share my experience with anyone except those I trusted and who I knew would warn me if what I was saying sounded insane or brain damaged, or if I was acting strangely. Since my white light encounter, or near-death experience, I've read reports of hundreds of reported near-death experiences and subscribed to the monthly Journal of Near-Death Studies, which strives for fairness in its editorial approach. I've read many of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, MD's writings, as well as those of PMH Atwater, Kenneth Ring, Michael Sabin, Gary Zukav, Kimberly Clark Sharp, and others, as well as more recent research by Bruce Grayson, MD, Melvin Morse, MD, Sam Parnia, MD, and Peter Fenwick, MD, but the evidence-based medical literature. What I've learned from reading is that many people have had comparable situations to mine. Many folks appear to have gained a stronger faith in God as a result of the experience. Children appear to have a more pure experience with fewer cultural undertones. Some individuals do have experiences that connect them to a significant religious figure or deity that correlates to their previous religious upbringing. Some people who attempt suicide but fail are said to have had nightmare-like near-death experiences. Since my surgical recovery, I have restarted my work as a psychiatrist, and now include a few non-directive inquiries about any unique experiences someone may have had during an accident or a medical operation as part of my history. I've also had 2 patients spontaneously confess to me what they had previously told no one, and they produce reports for me that are variations on my own experience, but they had previously said nothing for fear of being labeled mad. Neither patient was being treated by me for a psychotic illness. Was my experience caused by ketamine, a potentially hallucinogenic drug, or was it caused by a flooding of my temporal lobe? The event's cross-cultural nature confuses rather than clarify. Some civilizations see caves, while others see light tunnels. Could that have been a result of hypoxia? My personal experience with hypoxia in the Air Force in a closely regulated setting was in no way comparable to the feelings I felt while seeing the light. Was it a change in consciousness, mediated by subatomic particles in the brain that respond to quantum mechanics laws rather than cellular and molecular biology? I've been reading the most recent works by Christoph Koch and other eminent neuroscientists who are attempting to localize the brain sites for consciousness, with the prefrontal cortex currently being the most likely suspect. But will this lead to a single neuron, or a set of neurons, or specific molecular neurotransmitters? Or will particle size continue to shrink and become more difficult to identify until technology improves tenfold? Could there be microtubules or fields of energy that encircle each of us and in which our spirit resides after we physically die? Even if the death is brief as in near-death experiences, just as there are currently stirring stories involving the cosmos about which credible scientists theorize. Or, to save the most perplexing question for last, was it a genuine religious experience confirming the presence of God? Teams of recognized scientists are currently working on refining experimental design and expanding the scope and quality of reporting. There are organizations, such as IANDS, that are seeking to educate, inform, and finance actual scientific study in a field where much of what is written appears to be folklore and wish fulfillment. Some experiencers claim to have gained various superpowers and have written books that are quite popular in today's religious pop psychology industry. I regret to inform you that I have not acquired any new abilities or powers, and recent research investigations appear to validate that such claims cannot be validated, despite the many anecdotal accounts and books on the lecture circuits. I'm looking forward to reading the findings of the current teams of scientists, as well as the increasingly complex questions they'll pose. I just learned of a study conducted by experts at the University of Chicago, soon to be published in the Journal of General Internal Medicine, which discovered that the majority of US doctors believe in God and afterlife. 76% of the 1,004 doctors polled believe in God, with 59% believing in some type of afterlife. Prior to my respiratory arrest, or NDE, my beliefs included believing in God, but with the strong conviction that the best way to demonstrate this was to be helpful to my fellow man while alive, and with no expectation of being rewarded in an afterlife for my deeds, because I did not believe in an afterlife. I awoke from my respiratory arrest/NDE with the clear conviction that there is a God, a kind, forgiving God who is the same God for all of humanity. Was I so afraid by my near-death experience that I had to mentally construct this strong conviction? I have no recollection of anything frightening during my experience. My awakening and following long recuperation were painful, but my later absolute conviction of God's existence perplexes me. So, as a scientist, should I avoid reviewing current research for fear of slipping into the scientific trap of immaculate perception and accepting just that which supports my own belief as truth? I hope I've had enough training in the scientific process and modern evidence-based medicine to discern belief, no matter how strong, from fact, no matter how shown. Many years passed, and as time went, I occasionally pondered when or if I would gain the superpowers mentioned by some experienced. In a recent talk with me, one of my other sons brought up the past, asking, "Dad, remember that white light experience? Telling you there was something you had to be? You had to be a granddad," he said. As it turned out,